Classic Space is a very iconic Lego theme, but miniatured? I'm here with Troublesbricking and his Classic Space build. What do we got here?
So when the Classic Space minifigure came out in Series 24, it came with the Classic Spacebaby, and I felt that that baby needed to have his own ship, so I naturally gravitated towards my first childhood set, which was the X-1 Patrol Craft, and I went ahead and made a classic homage in baby scale, as I like to call it now, of that. And then after that, someone said, well, why not make the two-seater? So I'm like, all right, I'll make the two-seater. And then a friend of mine's like, well, let's do all the 78 and 79 sets. And so I went ahead and started that. And then, of course, once you start down the path, I had to complete them all. So one thing led to another, and now I have all 74 baby space homages to the original Classic Space sets.
What were some of the hardest parts about doing this?
All right, so there are lots of details about Classic Space sets that are iconic and that they were specifically in Classic Space. So I needed to make sure that I could replicate those specific nuances in the baby scale size, which was a real challenge because not everything exists in certain colors. Not everything has a counterpart that's smaller. So it really got I had to get real creative on a lot of parts to make them do what I wanted them to do to still keep that iconic feel and look to the actual Classic Space set.
Which one's your favorite in this?
Well, and again, I got to go back to the first one because that was the one that was my favorite as a child. However, two of my favorite Classic Space sets in general, of course, would be the Uranium Search Vehicle and the Solar Power Transport. So for me, those have always been, staples in my Classic Space collection. But at this point in time, because I've spent so much time and intimacy going through them all, they're like all my children. So they're all my favorites because they all have different nuances and different reasons of why I love that set, because it plays the homage to the original sets that I already love, and it's just a perfect match.
What are some details you love about,
All right, so for me the nuances of Classic Space have to do with the color schemes, which is of course obvious. But after the color schemes, it's about the play features, the modularity, how the rockets go. So everything had to be consistent. I started out in the early stages with the earlier sets, and whatever foundation or parts that I used for specific pieces, I had to keep that going through the whole series. So there's consistency from one series to the next as you go through the years, and keeping them all consistent. So like the tires, as the tires would change, I needed to change the tires. As the colors change, of course, I'm going to change that. But the biggest thing for me was the play features, the modularity. When the fact that I had the Galaxy Explorer, the back has to open up and the ramp has to come down so that the rover can drive up and go in. When you're talking about, say, the FF Explorer, I had to make sure that the door opens up in the back just like the original did, that the rover can come out, and also that the front and the back can be modular to keep that play feature. All of those play features were very important to replicate to that detail level. Another thing that I tried to do is because I knew that people were gonna want these. And so I wanted to make instructions available for them, but I also didn't want to make it so difficult for them to be able to put them together. So I tried to keep as much as possible only current production pieces, so that people didn't have to go spending, $5 for something that they're only going to use once. So that was important to try and keep it all current production pieces. I did that probably for 99% of the time. There are a few exceptions. For example, in back here, these big trans windows are, again, original Classic Space parts. I did also use a 3-finger hinge here because, again, a lot of parts that just don't exist in blue that I wish they did exist in blue. And of course, everything's also a lot of single connections, so they tend to come apart a little easy, but it's the whole concept of scale. Another thing that I also had to worry about is the Cosmic Fleet Voyager here. I wound up having to use these inverted corners and the corners on top. Unfortunately, the inverted corners only came in this set and the original set and a 9-volt container truck. So unfortunately, not a lot of people are probably going to be able to build this one and keeping these parts the same because they are uncommon and rare and usually pretty expensive to do. But other than that, everything else is pretty easy. It should be pretty easy to part out and build their own.
If someone was to build Classic Space, what advice would you give them? I mean, any Classic Space or Classic Baby Space?
For Classic Baby Space, I think you just kind of got to go whimsical and have fun with it. Make it chibi, you know, distort it a little bit and just have fun with it. Classic Space in general, pick a color scheme and go from there.
Any last thoughts?
Space!